Ready to go.
Good evening all. Welcome to the April meeting of the Mansfield Shire Council. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, CEO Carly Connery. Good evening, the Executive, Kirsten Alexander and Chris Snook. And a particularly warm welcome to members of the community who may be listening in at the moment. If we can start the meeting, I'll call on each councillor and ask them to verbally confirm that they can see all councillors and can hear the proceedings. Councillor Rabi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can see all councillors and hear the meeting.
Councillor Sladden. You're mute, Paul. Paul, you're on mute. Paul, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
right now.
Yep, I can hear the can see the proceedings and hear all the councillors in the meeting.
Clearly, the internet in Bonnie needs fixing up, Paul.
It's the weather, Mr.
The weather.
Right.
Councillor Tam.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can hear the proceedings and see all of the councillors.
Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I can hear the proceedings and see all councillors and council officers.
Councillors, can you raise your hand just to acknowledge that you can hear each other? Thank you, councillors. Madam CEO, are there any apologies?
There are no apologies for tonight's meeting, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam CEO. The statement of commitment, item 4, I will read the statement and call on each councillor to confirm their commitment. As councillors of Mansfield Shire, we are committed to ensuring our behaviour meets the standards set by the Mansfield Shire Council Code of Conduct and Councillor Charter. We will at all times faithfully represent and uphold the trust placed in us by the community. Councillor Rabi.
Yes, I confirm my statement of commitment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Rabi. Councillor Sladden.
I confirm my commitment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tan.
I confirm my statement of commitment.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I confirm my commitment.
Thank you. Acknowledgement of country. Deputy Mayor Tan, will you recite Council's acknowledgement of country?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor. Our meeting is being held on the lands of the Taungurung people and we wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. We would also like to pay our respects to their elders past and present and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today.
Thank you, Councillor Tan. Item 6 is a disclosure of the conflicts of interest. If I can call on each councillor and if you can declare if you have any conflicts of interest with tonight's agenda. Councillor Rabi.
I have no conflicts of interest in tonight's agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sladden.
I have no conflicts of interest in relation to any agenda item.
Thanks, Councillor Sladden. Councillor Tan.
I have no conflict of interest into any agenda items tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
I have no conflicts of any in relation to any agenda items tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have a motion regarding the conflicts of interest? No, sorry, regarding the confirmation of the minutes for the Mansfield Shire Council meeting held on the 15th of March, on 16th of March. Councillor Tam.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to recommend that the minutes of the Mansfield Shire Council meeting held on the 16th of March 2021 be confirmed as an accurate record.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Rabi.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Those in favour? The motion is passed. Thank you. Representations. We have a representation regarding a petition supporting a public toilet facility at Merrijig that has been received from 157 signatures. Do we have a motion regarding this representation? Councillor Rabi.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a recommendation to receive and note the petition regarding a public toilet facility at Merrijig and to refer the petition to the Chief Executive Officer for consideration and a response to be tabled at a future meeting.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sladen? Are there any comments at all to that?
No.
Those in favour? Motion is passed.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. We also have representation tonight. Ms. Ellen Hogan will be attending tonight's meeting to speak to agenda item 13.2.1, application for an amendment to the planning permit number P055A/20. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam CEO. That was my mistake for not remembering that. Thank you. Item 10 is the Mayor's report. I'll take that as being read. Do we have a motion to support that? Councillor Tam?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd recommend that Council receive the Mayor's report for the period 17th of March to 13th of April 2021.
A seconder? Councillor Ravi? Thank you. Those for? Motion is passed. Item 11 is reports from the council appointed representatives on various committees. If we can just work our way down through the list there, the Goulburn Broken Greenhouse Alliance Group, Councillor Webb. Is there anything to report from that meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No updates. We haven't met since the previous meeting. Next meeting is scheduled for May.
Thank you. The Human Regional Local Government Network, that committee hasn't met since previous meeting. The Lake Eildon Land and On-Water Management Plan Implementation Committee, Councillor Sladen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The April meeting has been deferred and the next meeting has been rescheduled for May. So nothing to report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. The Council Audit and Risk Committee meeting, Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Again, have not met since the previous meeting, but I believe the next one is in May also.
Thank you. The Mansfield Shire Business Community and Community Recovery Advisory Committee, Councillor Sladen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the recent meeting, recommendations were put forward to that committee regarding the granting of seed funding, and that will be addressed further in tonight's agenda.
Thank you. The Municipal Association of Victoria, there was a meeting held today, this afternoon, for the Rural North East MAV reps, of which myself and the CEO attended online. That meeting was about the a couple of points, mostly the forthcoming MAV State Council meeting on May the 21st, to provide an update on the timing of that and what has to be done for that, and also some of the basics behind getting their strategic plan together for that, for the MAV, and what are the issues facing the North East councils. Madam CEO, would you like to add anything at all to that?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well covered.
It was very brief. Thank you. The North East Local Government Waste Forum, Councillor Ravi.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yep, we met on the 18th of March. I've been voted to chair that meeting and chair that this group for the next year, taking over from Councillor Danny, or Mayor Danny from Benalla. There were 3 presentations from Sustainability Victoria by Selena Paps, one from Emergency Management Combustibles Material by John Mellier, and another one by Randall Environmental, Paul Randall, about closed landfills, which was quite interesting. Out of that, I didn't know, but out of that, the information that was interesting was that the northeast has the best groundwater in Australia. So it's we're very keen to keep it that way. There was recommendations for litter and illegal dumping plan. There's also a report that came out from the government, from DELWIP, to support local councils and alpine resorts with the implementation of recycling and a plan for the bins, the 4-bin policy that's going to take about 3 or 4 years to implement. And that's about it, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Rowe. Can we have a motion that, regarding these reports? Councillor Tam?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that council note the verbal reports provided by council laws in relation to their representation on external committees.
Thank you. We have a seconder? Councillor Sladen? All those in favour? The motion is passed. Item 12, public question time. We have 2 questions that have been received. Both questions from Mr. Brent Taylor. The first question is, may the council please advise on the ongoing maintenance schedule for the unsealed section of Buttercup Road. There are often potholes and ruts that aren't rectified for an unreasonable time, posing risk of damage to vehicles. Council's response to Mr. Taylor's question is that Council's road management plan lists Buttercup Road as being graded once annually, with drainage maintenance works also undertaken annually. Council's road management plan can be found on Council's website under road management, and this plan guides Council's work schedule and commitment on roads. However, despite the annual grade outlined in the plan, due to the increasing traffic volumes in 2020, Council graded the unsealed section of Buttercup Road 3 times, on the 12th of January, the 20th of April and the 8th of December. Council also plans to grade the road again in May, with a grading crew currently working in Merridging. All these extra grades are above and beyond what was set out in Council's road management plan. Grading is only part of maintaining the roads in appropriate condition. Resheeting is also important. Buttercup Road was last resheeted during the 2018-2019 program, and Council's Operations and Capital Works team will be reviewing and prioritising future capital works on this road for inclusion in the 10-year asset management road plan. Question 2 from Mr. Brent Taylor is, would the council consider improving line markings and signage at the intersection of Malcolm and Chenery Street? I understand this may fall in Vic Road's jurisdiction. Response from the executive regarding that question, Mr. Taylor, is Chenery Street and the eastern portion of Malcolm Street is the responsibility of Regional Roads Victoria, formerly known as Vic Roads. Council meets regularly with Regional Roads Victoria to discuss roads within the Shire. Council will review the line marking and signage and discuss further with Regional Roads Victoria. Council's Operation and Capital Works team support the need for improvements to the signage and line marking at the intersection of these roads to avoid driver confusion, and will raise this with the Department of Transport representatives. At the Malcolm and Chenery Street junction, there are multiple signs that need review and relocation if possible. The line marking also needs to be updated for drivers turning into Chenery Street from Malcolm Street. So thank you, Mr. Taylor, for both those questions. Hopefully that gives a response that meets the question. Item 13 is the Chief Executive Officer's report. Are there any questions from councillors regarding the CEO's report? Sorry, Councillor Sladen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. CEO, I'm just wondering why, under the Building Services section of your report, we do not have the March figures for the value of permits lodged, nor the monthly comparison of permits lodged for the month of March. Is there a reason for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass over to our General Manager of Infrastructure and Planning, maybe to respond to that. It may have been an oversight, but I'll just pass it over to see if there's anything in addition to that. Thank you.
Yes, I think that was an oversight. They should have been included, and we will make sure they're included in the next month's report.
Thank you, Ms. CEO and Ms. Alexander. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Councillor Tehan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just Madam CEO, on page 20 of your report, the figures which show the resignation of 20 volunteers for Meals on Wheels. Is there an explanation for that other than the obvious?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will pass over to the General Manager of Community and Corporate Services to see if he would like to answer that question. I do have something to add perhaps, but I'll pass it over at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Councillor Tien, other than timing, I'm not aware of any particular occurrence that has brought that about. I suspect it's reporting timing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to add to that, last year saw the exit of a number of volunteers as we went through COVID, and particularly in the Meals on Wheels area. And when we started back with volunteers, we had to add the additional requirement of additional training. So all our volunteers now have to go through a COVID safe training regime. A lot of that was online. A number of our volunteers that were delivering meals were in that age bracket in their 80s. So I think it was about the realisation of the extra requirement that Council has now in place with COVID and the COVID safe delivery. So a number of volunteers I do know resigned over that type of environment, which was hard for us to see, but absolutely necessary with the COVID environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO.
Sorry, so has that had any effect on service as such?
We have, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have been doing a volunteer drive. There's been some media in our in the Courier. We've put in some media during a couple of weeks in a row, and we've also had to use staff on occasion. So there has been a number of occasions where we've had to pull staff from the office to deliver meals. So we are doing a recruitment drive at the moment.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Are there any further questions? No. Can I ask for someone to move a motion regarding the CEO's report? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The motion being that Council receive and note the Chief Executive Officer's report for the period 17th of March 21 to 13th of April 21.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sladen. Those in favour? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.2 and 13.2.1 is under the jurisdiction of General Manager Infrastructure and Planning, Kirsten Alexander, and we have a guest joining us to speak on behalf of the recommendation regarding an issue a notice of refusal to grant an amendment to the planning permit, and that is Ellen Hogan. Ellen, can you hear us, Ellen?
Yes, I can.
Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us. You'd like to speak to the notice?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Madam CEO. Just a bit of background on this application, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to the application. Firstly, and it's probably been mentioned to you, but I haven't been privy to your previous discussions. If you've already addressed some of this application, the wrong planning permit is attached to the agenda. There was a new amended permit was issued on the 5th of November 2020. I must say that condition 8 is still the same though on that amended permit. My clients are undertaking a 3-stage subdivision located on the eastern end of Dead Horse Lane. Stages 1 and 2 were completed by a different developer who constructed the stormwater detention basin adjacent to the Mansfield-Whitfield Road. It was our belief that this detention basin was constructed to cater for all 3 stages of the subdivision. As stage 3 of the subdivision progressed, various emails were sent back and forth to council to ascertain what items in the permit needed finalising so that a statement of compliance could be issued. Emails to us by council's engineering representative, who was signing off on compliance, advised support for an application to amend the permit to remove the condition relating to the bond. And we have that in an email. We understood that this was because we submitted our Site Environmental Management Plan, or a SEMP. This plan was drawn up by earthworks contractors to indicate how we would protect the site during subdivision construction phase. Every subdivision is required to do one. Also, because no bond had been placed on the developers who had completed stages 1 and 2 and constructed the detention basin. In February, we therefore applied for an amendment to remove the condition relating to the bond, following this consultation with council and in good faith. We are now advised that our amendment has not been supported. We also read in the agenda report, paragraph 6 on page 12. It is noted that the accompanied SEMP does not properly indicate the location of sediment controls, which needs to be amended and resubmitted. We also lodged our SEMP to council in February. We have written advice from council that our SEMP was satisfactory, and we believe so. Also, my clients met on site a few weeks ago with council engineering representatives and earth moving contractors, pre-commencement of works meeting. There was no mention of changes to the SEMP. On behalf of my clients who wish me to let you know, it is disappointing that we now find that the SEMP needs amending through the officer's report in a public document, the agenda. Why have we not been formally advised weeks ago that our SEMP needed amending? Our application to amend the permit and remove condition 8 was submitted to council on the 24th of February based on advice from council engineering staff, and is now being refused. The development industry requires certainty when commencing projects of this scale. It also needs a coordinated approach between various council departments so that the developer can proceed with certainty and definitely without any further delay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this application.
Thanks, Alan, for that. Councillors, are there any questions of Ms. Hogan? Alan, just out of a couple of questions I've got. Oh, sorry, Councillor Webb. Sorry, I didn't see that.
No, that's right. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alan, for presenting that to us. That's really informative. I guess from my point of view, very interesting hearing your side of the story. I'd like more information and copies of emails and things like that to be circulated, I think, through the executive, if that's okay. That's probably my only comment. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Just in terms of the bond, how much do you think that'll be?
Oh, that's something that we have to work on. We've been trying to find out from the previous developers how much they paid for it and how much their portion was for, I think it's about resetting, replanting. How much would that cost? We haven't got that information at the moment, so we'll have to engage another engineer to give us that advice. I think the bond is 1.5 times that cost.
It's not sure of the cost.
No, we have to sort that out. We have to sort that out. We hadn't really got into that side of it, mainly because we'd applied for the amendment to have the bond removed. So that's something we need to go back to.
And Ellen, if there's no bond, what guarantees we have that there's no repercussions at all on council? What protection has council got?
Well, as far as the subdivision itself goes, the council's got its site environmental management plan, which should be in place to protect any downstream sediment runoff. That's what it's there for. So while we're building pipelines, connecting sewerage, that's to protect that. But it's something, how do we protect it when we have, say, a bit of a rogue building person that goes on there and decides not to do their own individual protections of sediment. So one of our queries was too is how do we protect our bond from somebody else who we've got no control over? We can control the site environmental management plan while we're doing the construction, but we can't control individual landowners. You know, therefore to protect the bond. But normally in place when you do a development like that, you'll put your hay bales or your sediment controls, you know, in place so that they can't run off into the stormwater drains or end up into this detention basin, which is there to catch any sediment that runs off. We're not saying we're going to be trying our hardest not to pollute it at all, but that's there to catch any further sediment that might run off. Well, it should be after the site's developed, which there shouldn't be any sediment after the sites are developed because they'll all have their lawns there. So it's just another measure to protect water quality. But so we can put something in place initially to protect the construction stage of the subdivision. But the bond appears to be there, the 1.5, probably more so to protect when individual landowners construct on their site.
Councillor Raby. Thanks, Alice. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Hogan, Steve Raby here. How are you?
Thank you, Steve.
Can you tell me, you just mentioned in your speech to us or proposal to us that this is stage 3, and I think you said that it's a different developer. Is that correct? It's not the same developer?
Yes, different developer to stage 1 and 2.
Right. So, okay. Thank you very much. That's thanks. Answer my question.
It was the developer of stage 1 or 2 who put the detention basin in, and I believe it was put in to cater for the 3 stages.
Okay, thank you.
He didn't do the 3rd stage. Yeah.
Councillors, are there any other questions? Just one point I have, and it just regards a question in the recommendation was, I'll just read this. The removal of condition 8 of the permit would mean that council would have to bear the cost of any works necessary to remediate the bioretention swale were it to become less efficient due to discharge from the subdivision site and any later construction of dwellings in that subdivision. That's the clause that really concerns me. And how does not paying that bond get around that? Gets a little bit back to my previous question.
I have to say that it doesn't, and I can understand being in the development industry having guarantees as well, you know, for council's assets. I suppose what got lost in this thing was that we were advised to remove it because we had our SEMP in place, and we did that in good faith in February, put in the amendment. And since then, we've been told that it's been refused. It's up to council to make that decision too with the bond. And if anything was to end up in there, into that, well, it'd have to be a lot of sediment for resent and replant, I agree, which we're not going to put any in there because we've got a very good, well-constructed site environmental management plan to make sure that sediment doesn't get in there during construction stage of the subdivision. But as we stated in council's agenda, it's now saying that hasn't been supported. And we don't know what that means. So we haven't had a formal letter from council telling us how we have to amend our site environmental management plan. We've only read it tonight in the agenda. So we have to go back now and have that amended, but we're not sure what we need to amend.
Right. Okay, councillors, sorry, any other questions?
Mr.
Sorry,
Mayor.
Councillor Slade? Councillor Slade?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is that the SEMP that you submitted in November has been accepted, Ms. Hogan.
We submitted in February, yes, and we have an email.
The February, yes.
Yeah, and we have an email
the February
to say
one,
that,
yes.
that site environmental management plan is appropriate.
Yes, yes. So that's, you do not need to go back and resubmit your SEMP because that has been, the February one has been accepted is my understanding. Perhaps Ms. Alexander can clarify that.
Yeah. We're just unsure of that because of what's in the agenda.
Okay.
Yes, I can, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that SEMP has been accepted and that comment in the report is not correct.
So just to be sure, Ms. Hogan, councillors are aware that the incorrect planning permit has been attached to this report, and we're also aware of the oversight in the report that refers to the November and not the February SEMP. However, my understanding is regardless of those two oversights, it does not allay the officer's concerns regarding any potential disruption to the detention basin.
Yes. Yes, we've seen that in the agenda, that's what the conclusion was, you know, after everything's been in. Yep. Yes. We probably would not have applied for an amendment though if we'd been told this at the start. We would have saved ourselves some time, you know, since February. But moving on, yes, I agree what you said, Councillor Sladen.
Okay. Is there any more questions or comments? Thank you, Alan, for your time there. And you made your points very clearly, so thank you for that. Do we revert back to the council meeting now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're still in the council meeting, yes, and Ms. Hogan can go off video and on mute and listen to the rest of the council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There you are, Mr. Mayor.
Well, good, thank you. Councillor Tan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just to let you know, I'm having some unstable internet problems. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I have been losing a little bit of it, but then I come back in. So if I seem to be inactive, that's why.
Right, okay. Thanks, Councillor Tan. Do we have any further discussion, questions? Councillor Raby?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, that if the stage 3 of the development was not was the same developer, would this requirement still be requested, or are we, or not?
Ms. Alexander, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I I don't think that would change things. My understanding is under stage 1 and 2, the basin was constructed at that time, but it's now been handed over to council. So whether it was the same developer or a new developer, I would anticipate that our response, the condition would still stand.
Thank you.
Can I just go back? Sorry, Councillor Toon.
Yeah, I just had a question just regarding Miss Hogan's comment about the email sent to her on the 24th of the 2nd from council staff regarding the need for Section 8. Have we got clear direction on that of whether that was sent or not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at Ms. Alexandra. I'd probably pass over to our Manager of Planning,
Yes, that'd be
Ms.
appropriate.
Crane, to answer that response, noting that Ms. Crane has only recently joined council. So over to you. Thank you.
Mister, we can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you might have to speak up a little bit.
Okay, so sorry, I have to lean in because the microphone's not awesome. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the planning permit, so the advice was from one of the development engineers to apply for an amendment to the planning permit. The amendment to the planning permit has to be assessed under the provisions of the Planning and Environment Act and the intent of the provisions that apply to the land at the time. So whilst the advice was to apply for an amendment to remove the condition, and that is advice that, I wasn't here at the time, and perhaps that is a conversation we can take offline, certainly with the engineering department going forward. But certainly from a planning perspective, we have to assess it under the relevant provisions of the Planning and Environment Act, which is where the recommendation is sitting in terms of the refusal under the provisions of that legislation, not necessarily, and that's not necessarily an area of expertise for the engineers with respect to their areas of knowledge. I'm not sure, I hope that answers the direct question. I'm happy to provide a bit more information in relation to some of the commentary that Ms. Hogan has made, if you'd like. Yep. Simply, in terms of this application, yes, so we acknowledge that there's an error in the attachment in that the incorrect permit's in there, but I did speak to council and let you know about that earlier. In relation to the SEMP, I have actually emailed Ms. Hogan today to confirm that that SEMP is acceptable and we won't be looking to have it amended. The question we have is that certainly whilst the SEMP is a big part of protection of council assets in the short term while they're doing the construction, it doesn't give us enough protection to remove the condition, because if the works aren't undertaken in accordance with that SEMP, so say the development changes hands again and the people that take it over don't start working in that same manner, then we could end up having this situation where the retardation basin is damaged, and we do need to try and find a way to avoid that. The comments earlier about the previous developer, who were the ones that constructed it, if it was the same developer, now it's a council asset, they would definitely have the same condition for a bond, because it's our asset and we need to maintain that. The other thing that's important to note, and I understand how that could feel unfair, and I respect Ms. Hogan's position on that, but it would have happened if it had been the same developer. The other thing worth noting that I do take on board that there is some concern about the permit applicant having some surety that they're not going to be protecting the basin and other people will create damage to it, and I understand their concern in that regard. However, what we're more than happy as council officers to do, the community protection local law, number 1 at 26.2 has a requirement for any person, so regardless of this development, to not destroy, damage or interfere with a council asset. So we're more than happy to provide advice to people downstream of this development, so between the retardation basin and this development site, giving them some general advice about their obligations under our community local law to try and make sure there's more surety for this developer in relation to any potential impacts on the basin that they may not cause. So we certainly happy to try and work with them in that respect, outside of the recommendation that we would still like to retain that condition in relation to the bond on the asset. Thank you.
And Ms. Crane, just with respect to some question I asked Ms. Hogan, if we don't go ahead with this bond, is the council financially exposed?
There is a risk. So while the planning permit says they have to operate in accordance with the site environmental management plan, because it's not on the land that they own, if there is damage after the subdivision has been completed, so this bond is refunded after 2 years of statement of compliance. So once there'll be the development, and it will take some time for those blocks to be individually developed. After that point, it will have all settled down enough so no silt will be running off anymore. But there is a risk that if once a statement of compliance issues, there's no longer an obligation on the developer to do any remediation works, because a planning permit for subdivision is considered spent once the statement of compliance has been issued, and we don't have any real grounds in relation to enforcement past that point. The main way we have bonds for subdivisions is for that exact reason. We do maintenance bonds when we have road construction to make sure that the road that is constructed is also maintained for a period of time post statement of compliance. And this is a similar thing, but it's about protecting a retardation basin in this instance.
And is this bond and the terms of the bond fairly common for this sort of development?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Ivey?
I'd like to get a feel about the extent of the monetary value of this bond. Is it hundreds of thousands of dollars, or are we talking, I don't know, 5, 10 grand? What are we talking? At 1.5 doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I certainly understand that they would need to get a quote. Essentially, the quote would need to be to just to desilt and to reset with replant the existing basin. So I don't imagine it would be within the hundreds of thousands. I couldn't give you an estimate, but Ms. Hogan had mentioned some prices that were under $20,000 based on some of the information she had. And I imagine that they would be less than that in this instance. But certainly, if there's no damage to the basin, and with the proper retardation, the proper works on the site post-development with some hay bales, as Ms. Hogan was mentioning, and on top of us making sure we work with the other landowners to know their obligations, it will just get refunded. And we're also more than happy to do post statement of compliance inspections to have an agreed position as to which state that the basin will be accepted back in and the bond refunded on through that process to try and provide them a little bit more surety there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, councillors, do we have a motion to move?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. We've just lost Councillor Tan. In terms of governance rules, we do need to make sure councillors are present that have agreed to be present tonight. So just waiting to see if Councillor Tan can come back online. Great, thank you.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Councillor Tan.
Sorry, I'm just trying to fix this internet. Sorry.
Councillors, do we have a motion before us at the moment? Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion being as written in tonight's agenda, that council, having considered all the relevant matters required under section 60 of the Planning and Environment Act of 1987 and under the provisions of the Mansfield Planning Scheme, issue a notice of refusal to grant an amendment to planning permit PO 55/20 for the development of the land for a 15-lot subdivision at 340 Dead Horse Lane, Mansfield, on the following grounds as written in the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Snowden? Thank you. All those in favour? Motion is passed. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.2.2, Mansfield 2040 Planning Land Use Strategy. Again, under the General Manager of Infrastructure and Planning, Kirsten Alexander. Are there any questions, councillors, on what's before us? Sorry, Councillor Webb, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment regarding the community consultation. I know we've passed a policy around community consultation, but I don't think we've actually seen the, I guess, the full procedure behind it. Will this consultation schedule, this engagement, will that be suitable to meet the requirements of the new Local Government Act? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Madam CEO or Ms. Alexander, would either of you like to address that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could the question please be repeated? I was chatting to our administration then, just to get some stuff happening behind the scenes. Sorry, missed the question.
Sure thing. My question being that the community consultation side of this particular strategy, I know we've passed a policy for new community consultation, but I don't think we've seen the full procedure or the method how that's going to happen. So the consultation that we're proposing in this particular strategy, is that going to be sufficient for deliberative engagement for the new Local Government Act?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Webb. Council is only required to undertake deliberative engagement for a couple of elements. So one being your community vision project, your financial plan and asset management. And I think there's a couple others. So yes, to answer your question, yes, this does meet the requirements of the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Councillor Tan? Councillor Tan, you're on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Just a question regarding the report updates, and it states that the agricultural employment numbers have been reviewed from the previous draft of the strategy, and also a reference for climate change has been included. I was just wondering about whereabouts and what impact that is. Well, first the question, agricultural employment. What's changed there in terms of the report we're looking at now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass over to our General Manager, Infrastructure and Planning to answer that question. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Mayor. In relation to the detail on the numbers, I don't have that at hand, but as I understand it, they basically did a refresh because it had been probably about, some time since the first paper was put together. So we might have to take that one on notice in terms of any specific change that came about, but we did ask them to go back and respond to questions that arose from the councillor briefing. And that was one of the things that they just reviewed, refreshed and updated, but we can get you some more specifics on that. I'm not sure if our Manager of Planning would have anything to add to that. I'll just check in with her just in case she's got some additional detail at hand.
I don't have any additional details other than they've been based on the ABS data. So I imagine it's because the data in the ABS has been updated, but we can certainly confirm that and get back to councillors.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lucy, you may have to speak up just next time you speak. We just hear you. We got the message, but we can just hear you. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Do we have a motion to move? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is the council note the update provided on progress with the preparation of the draft Mansfield 2040 strategy and supporting documents and the proposed next steps for engagement with the community provided in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Webb? All those in favour?
Before we do that, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to speak to it, if I may.
Yeah.
This is an extremely important strategic document for the Mansfield Shire and the Mansfield community, the Mansfield Shire community, that is. I'm particularly delighted to see the attention that this report gives to the outlying areas and its call for a town structure, a hierarchy to ensure that there is equitable distribution of services across the Shire. So I do encourage all residents and ratepayers to go onto the website, onto the Have Your Say portal and make comment on it and to participate in the community consultations that will be forthcoming. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Any other comments? Councillor Webb, would you like to speak to seconding that, or?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mirroring what Councillor Sladen said, very important document for the future of Mansfield Shire as a whole. And yes, certainly want to see as much community engagement as possible on this.
Thank you. All those in favour? The motion is passed. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 13.2.3, request for council consent rezoning of land under the Government Land Planning Service Withers Lane at Withers Lane. The responsible officer is General Manager Infrastructure and Planning, Kirsten Alexander. Ms. Alexander, would you like to speak at all to this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think this one's fairly straightforward, but happy to take any questions that councillors have.
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Webb?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one, and it has been touched on in the report already, regarding that little overlap there between the township approaches zone and the requested rezoning land. In terms of what levers or controls we have over the use of that land, do we see any potential issues in unsightly infrastructure or things being built in that area on that approach?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of what they're proposing to do, my understanding it's a buffer zone, so I wouldn't expect so, but I might just, if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, just ask our Manager of Planning if she has anything further to add on that.
Thanks, Ms. Alexander. Ms. Crane?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't, generally these buffers are kept clear because they are about providing buffers from the, for the wastewater facilities. However, we can include some commentary in our response to them that outlines our concerns and reiterates that we would like that to be maintained and when we put a response back to them, if you'd like.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question to whoever wants to answer it is what impact this may have on the alternate route, or sometimes referred to as the heavy vehicle bypass.
Thanks. For you, Mr. Mayor. I do not think there would be any impact on that route based on what is proposed,
Thank
given
you.
that it is a buffer zone.
Yep, no worries. So we're allowed to do that within the buffer zone.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, the land that's in question is not obviously on the road corridor. So the road corridor, we would still, it won't have any impact on that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy
Any
to
other
take
questions? Do we have a motion? Councillor Ravi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make the recommendation that council, having considered Goulburn Valley Water's request, 1, provide written consent to Goulburn Valley Water for the rezoning of the land, and 2, request that council be provided with opportunities to comment on any future planning scheme amendment processes under the GLPS.
Thanks, Councillor Ravi. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tan? Would you like to speak any further to that, Councillor Ravi?
I think it's pretty straightforward here, Mr. Mayor, reading the document. So no, really, no comment, thanks.
And yourself, Councillor Tan?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Those in favour? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.1, the council plan performance reporting for the Q3. Responsible officer is the General Manager of Community and Corporate Services, Chris Snook. Are there any questions of Mr. Snook? No questions? Do we have a motion? Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion being that council receive and note the council plan performance report as at 31st March 2021.
Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Sladen? Those for the motion? Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.2 is the gifts, benefits and hospitality policy. The responsibility again is Mr. Chris Snook. Are there any questions or comments? Do we have a motion? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recommendation is the council endorse the gift, benefits and hospitality policy 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. A seconder? Councillor Tan? Those in favour? Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.3 is the privacy and data protection policy. Again, the responsible officer is Mr. Chris Snook. Any questions or comments? Do we have a motion? Councillor Sladen?
Recommendation, Mr. Mayor, is the council endorse the privacy and data protection policy.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Webb? Thank you. And those in favour? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.4. This is respect to grants, exceptional assistance and immediate support funding results. Again, under the auspices of Mr. Chris Snook, do we have any questions or comments on this, please? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As mentioned earlier in tonight's proceedings, this does come out of the Business and Community Recovery Advisory Committee, and this was the recommendation at the previous meeting of that committee. As you can see in the report, you can see the assessment subcommittee members, We're all local community and business members, and despite there being very strong competition for this grant funding or this seed funding, the recommendation that is there was certainly supported by all of the members of the Business and Community Recovery. Oh, we've now got and Resilience Advisory Committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. Any further comments or questions? Do we have a motion? Councillor Ravi?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The council supports the Business and Community Recovery and Resilience Advisory Committee's recommendation to fund the Highline, beg your pardon, Mountain Bike Festival by X-Venture Proprietary Limited, all-terrain cycles, through the exceptional assistance and immediate support funding with a grant of $100,000. 2, writes to all applicants to thank them for their application and to inform them of the results. And 3, thanks the Business and Community Recovery and Resilience Advisory Committee for assisting council in this process.
Thanks, Councillor Ravi. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sladen? Councillor Ravi, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great outcome for a lot of people in Mansfield, but especially I'd like to offer my sincere wishes to the Highline Mountain Festival. I went up there 3 times each day, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. They've done an amazing thing up there. It is now on the international register. I've been reliably informed that it may even be a silver course next year, which is an international silver course, is something that we should all be celebrating. Not to mention that the other Delatite Winery and Jamison Community Group, well done to them as well. But a big shout out to everyone involved in the Highline Mountain Festival. I was absolutely amazed and astounded. Young people having a good time, concentrating on their health and fitness. I was astounded. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ravi. Councillor Sladen, you second it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I just endorse what Councillor Ravi has said, and also noting the number of community volunteers that did assist in the preparation of the track for that event, as outlined by Councillor Ravi. So more than happy to support his motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.5, the finance report 1st of July to 31st of March 2021. Are there any, under the auspices of Mr. Chris Snook, are there any questions or comments?
No.
No questions or comments?
No.
I just got one question, if I could. Sorry, Councillor Ravi.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was flipping through my pages to get to the question that I've written down here. And sorry about that. And it's a question, I suppose, for Mr. Snook. It's 13.3.5 on page 42. I see that we've overspent $110,000 in legal expenses to date. I'd like to know where that overspend has occurred, and I may have another question after that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Ravi. I will give just a quick response, and then I will pass to Ms. Alexandra to talk as the overspend, as stated, $110,000 relates to VCAT proceedings. But through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass to Ms. Alexandra to elaborate on the activity related to those VCAT cases.
Ms. Alexandra?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. We have a number of cases that are ongoing. There was approximately 80,000 that was spent on the convenience restaurant case in defending council's position there and council's decision. There's still a case ongoing for the service station on High Street, directly alongside that site. That's estimated to end up around 40,000 in relation to supporting council's decision there. And we're estimating, so that makes a total of 120, and we're estimating about another 40,000 in order to defend council's decision in relation to the other service station, which is on the corner of Malcolm and Chinnery Street. Obviously, that depends on whether those cases that haven't been finished, whether they go the full duration, but that's based on our best guess at this point in time, our best estimate.
Thanks, Ms. Alexandra. Councillor Ravi?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ms. Alexandra. I've got a further question, I suppose, in relation to these ongoing legal costs. Have we got an estimate, and I suppose it's a ball up in the air estimate, really, that any idea as to what the expected cost all up is going to be, please?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Our current estimate, all up, including money already spent for those three cases, is around 160,000. It may, if the final case is shortened and doesn't go for the anticipated length of time, we expect the cost to be less than that. But that's our upper end estimate.
Thank you.
Just what percentage of our legal budget would that be? Legal expenses budget.
I don't. Sorry, through you, I might hand to Mr. Snook for that one.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I would need to have that question on notice. It would be a large portion of our legal, our legal budget. That would be an extraordinary amount.
An extraordinary amount, yeah. Thanks, Mr. Snook. Ms. Kinsley, did you want to add anything there? And welcome.
Sorry, just working the mute button. We don't budget legal expenses. So in terms of the percentage of legal, because legal is always unknown unless there's a case already in existence at budget date. So we don't actually put legal fees into the budget. So they typically come in as unbudgeted. So in terms of answering the percentage, we couldn't give you a number because there's nothing in the budget.
Right. Thank you. It's disappointing that it's got to such a large amount of money. Councillors, any further questions on that?
Well,
Councillor Riley?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, probably not a question as such, but maybe a comment that council were asked to support the community on one of these VCAT hearings, and I think we should say that we have done that. We are supporting the community. That's what they wanted, and so I'll leave it there. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ravi. Any other questions or comments? Councillors, do we have a motion for the financial report? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Motion being that council receives the year-to-date finance report for the period 1st July 2020 to 31st March 2021.
Seconder, Councillor Ravi. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion or speak to the seconding of the motion? Those in favour? Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.6, the proposed budget 21-22. Again, under the auspices of Mr. Chris Snook. Would anyone like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll take the report as read that obviously it's the proposed 21-22 budget, which is being presented this evening for endorsement. The draft we made available for public exhibition for 28 days, and public submissions will be received and considered by council prior to the budget being formally adopted in June.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Sook, can you just for anyone watching, when is the public meetings to be held? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah,
local and for non-residents.
We do have a schedule of dates that we'll make public. I don't think I can recite them off the top of my head. I can ask Ms. Kinnersley if she has the information available. However, they will be published on our website and our social media and other forums. So the public will certainly have adequate notice of the forums, and the dates are spread between now and the end of the submission. So it will be a thorough process, but I haven't got the dates off the top of my head.
Thank you. Do we have a motion regarding the 21-22 budget? Councillor Turn.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Recommendation is that council formally prepare the proposed budget 2021 for the purpose of section 94 of the Local Government Act 2020. Give public notice in the Mansfield Courier on council's website and Facebook page for the preparation of the proposed budget 21-22, and make available copies of the proposed budget 21-22 for public inspection purposes. And 3, in accordance with section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, establishes a special committee of council consisting of all councillors with a quorum of 3 councillors to hear submissions in relation to the proposed budget 2021-22 on Tuesday, the 25th of May, 2021 at the council chamber, or held remotely via electronic means. Thanks,
Councillor Turn. And that answers the question, sorry, Chris, of Mr. Snook, of when the date is in Mansfield. Councillor Rabi, second the motion.
Like to second the motion. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor. The opportunity for the mover to speak, please. And then the seconder and any other councillors, please.
Okay, sorry. Councillor Turn, would you like to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thanks. Yeah, I'd just like to firstly thank all the staff and the officers for preparing this budget. It was a very challenging budget. I think it took 2 or 3 or 4 more sessions than was initially proposed, because there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of conversations around different parts of the budget, and I'd like to thank the other councillors too for that robust debate. And as people will see, ratepayers will see, we've settled for a 0% rate increase, which is basically giving back to the community and acknowledging the hard times that we've had over the last 12 months and the challenges that we still may face in the future. And it's definitely a response to that. It's a fairly back to basics budget. There's a lot of money going into infrastructure where available, and it's so it is a very solid financial document.
Thank you, Councillor Tan. Seconded, Councillor Ravi, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just touching on Councillor Tan's point that there was robust debate. In the end, I'd like to say that from my point of view, this budget took into consideration how many people have done it pretty tough in the last year. I know that there are a lot of people in Mansfield that are struggling, and this reflects that view. Also shows the community that we are this whole council is looking at recovery of roads as well. So I would have liked to have seen more money, but there is none. So we have to do the best with what we've got. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ravi. Is there anyone else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Sladen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Ravi just said, there is no more money. The reason there is no more money is that the proposed, and keep in mind this is just the proposed budget, and what we are voting on here tonight is for it to go out on public exhibition and seek community input. And I strongly encourage that community input while appreciating Councillor Tian and Councillor Ravi's sentiment for a rate holiday, given the challenges that many people have experienced over the past 12 months. To my thinking, this is a naive, short-sighted and financially irresponsible proposed budget. What we are doing is that we are reducing our revenue, and a reduction in revenue leads to a reduction in services. So I say to the community, have a look, and if a reduction in revenue via a rate holiday, where the state government has set the rate cap at 1.5%, which would mean for Mansfield Shire Council an increase in revenue of $189,000 in the next 12 months. Over a 10-year period, this compounds to a loss of $2.2 million. On top of that, there'll be $3 million of debt, $2.6 million with a loan, so we're increasing our debt by 150%. It'll cost us $3 million all up by the time we pay it back. That's both principal and interest. So, as I say, reduction in revenue leads to reduction in services. And just yesterday, this council embarked on a consultation on the home and community care, aged services, a review. And as we've seen in tonight's agenda in the CEO's report, the number of hours the council provides for community care, not only in Mansfield, but in the outlying communities. If we want to see that continue and not be privatised, as one member of the public who was at the Bonnie Doon meeting yesterday said, once you privatise these things, it becomes profit before people. And my concern is with this proposed budget, that is what we'll be looking at. So I do ask the community to make sure you read this carefully and that you make a submission. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. Any other comments? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of points. I do mirror a lot of Councillor Sladen's concerns. the draft budget, and again reinforcing that it is a draft out for community consultation and feedback, which we need. Seeking to borrow up to $3 million is a significant amount of money. Yes, debt is currently cheap. The costs alone for the borrowing will be about $300,000. Just to put that in a bit of perspective, our current entire borrowings for the council is only at 1.9 million. So over the next 10 years, we're going to be paying that off at about 288,000 per year. So for a bit of perspective again on that, our new initiatives, council-funded initiatives in this draft budget was about 400,000. So by the time you take $288,000 of repayments in future budgets out of that, it leaves us with about $112,000 for any new initiatives council-funded for the next 10 years. It essentially means we're fully reliant on state and federal grants to offer anything new in our community, anything new. And $112,000, it would barely leave us enough money to develop any plans to shovel-ready stage for us to even apply for these grants. You know, we're experiencing unprecedented growth. We've all seen it. And we're already in a position where we are well behind community expectations in the services that we deliver. I really fear that having little to no new initiatives over the next 10 years will really put us in a really undesirable position. You know, we'll have a brand new truck bypass that'll be completely unused because there'll be a completely no desire to live, work, or start a new business here in Mansfield. So it does lead me to my next point regarding the rate cap increase. Again, mirroring Councillor Sladden's points regarding our concerns over not increasing the rates for this year. I do understand 2020 was a very difficult year for everybody. In perspective, passing on a 1.5% increase to the rate cap would impact on average residential people about $20 a year. $20 a year, by not passing that on, multiplies out to about $2.2 million over 10 years. And that's $2.2 million of services that we can't provide. So new initiatives, supporting our outlying communities, supporting our businesses, our elderly, our young people. It's support that we will not be able to provide as a service delivery organisation. So again, it'd be really interesting to see what the community has to say about some of these points. Be very interesting to say. I agree, parts of this budget represent poor judgment, irresponsible financial management, and to be honest, almost contempt of the greater community in some aspects. Really interested to hear what happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Is there any other comments? I think rather than some of this, there's a slight degree of scaremongering going amongst some of those comments. I think rather than continue some of those, the community will give us their feedback on what they think about the whole budget. And we look forward to hearing that, or I certainly look forward to hearing that. And I think the council does as well. Are there any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, the mover has the right to reply, should he wish to take that up.
Mr. Councillor Tan, thanks.
Excuse me, point of order. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Madam CEO. There is no right of reply because there was nobody voting or speaking against the motion.
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, the mover always has the right to reply after debate.
My understanding that's only when a motion, if somebody is voting against it or speaking against the motion. Nobody was speaking against the motion.
I'm sorry, I misinterpreted the comments made that were against the motion too.
No.
Thank you. But the right to reply still sits with the mover, Councillor Sladden, because at this stage there isn't an indication of how anyone will vote.
Well, I suggest we put it to the vote. But I'm more than happy to hear from Councillor Tehan.
That's where I thought we were going. Councillor Tehan, would you like to respond?
Yeah, no, I would. And as Madam CEO says, I agree with her. I misinterpreted the commentary that came from the last two speakers. But yeah, I agree with one of Councillor Sladden's points, and that is, let's put it out to the community. Let's hear what they've got to say. And it'll be very interesting to see, because I agree that some of those scaremongering comments need to be put to that test.
Mr. Mayor, I object to the use of the term scaremongering by yourself and the Deputy Mayor.
Point taken.
They're facts, not scaremongering.
Yeah, well, it's rhetoric, Councillor Sladden.
It's not rhetoric, it's facts.
We should just let it up to the community to decide.
Thank you.
Councillor Raby?
Well, on that point, Councillor Sladden and Webb, I object to the fact.
Councillor Raby, let's just stick to the motion.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, point of order. The debate has closed. You must put the vote now before anyone else speaks. Thank you.
Those in favour of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 13.3.7, proposed revenue and rating plan, 21-25. Responsible officer is Mr. Chris Nook. Are there any comments at all on the rating plan?
Mr. Mayor, I'll take the report as read. It talks about this draft will be made available for a 28-day public exhibition, the same, for formal adoption by council in June. Ms. Kennesley is here to support this report if there are any questions that need answering.
Councillors, are there any questions or comments? Do we have a motion? Councillor Raby?
Yeah, I'd like to make the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, that the council formally prepare the proposed revenue and rating plan 2021 to 2025 for the purposes of Section 93 of the Local Government Act 2020, and gives 2.2 gives public notice in the Mansfield Courier, on council's website and Facebook page, of the preparation of the proposed revenue and rating plan 21 to 25, and makes available copies of the proposed revenue and rating plan 21 to 25 for public inspection purposes. Also, 3, in accordance with Section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, establishes a special committee of council consisting of all councillors with a quorum of 3 councillors to hear submissions in relation to the proposed revenue and rating plan 21 to 25 on Tuesday, the 25th of May 2021 at the council chamber, or held remotely via electronic means.
Thanks, Councillor Raby. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sladden? Councillor Raby, do you want to add anything further?
Not particularly, just follows on from the budget really. So with a view to the next 4 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor
Sladden. No, this is, as Councillor Raby said, this is just supporting the motion to go out for public comment. Thank you.
Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.8 is the Outlying Communities Infrastructure Fund. Results of that. Again, the responsible officer is Mr. Chris Nook. Do we have any questions or comments on this infrastructure fund? Any questions? Councillor Raby?
Yeah, just like to mention to the community, Mr. Mayor, don't hang back. Basically, have a crack at applying for these grants. It's there to be applied for, and if you need help, contact the council officers for help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Raby. Any other comments? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recommendation is that council allocates the following funds from its outlying Community Infrastructure Fund 2021 to the Tolmy Mechanics Institute and Recreation Reserve Committee, $10,000. The Bodydoon Football and Netball Club, $20,000. The Merton Recreation and Memorial Reserves Incorporated, $20,000. Refers an amount of $50,000 to the 2021-22 budget for an outlying Community Infrastructure Fund 2022, and writes to both the successful and unsuccessful applicants and advise them of the outcome and thank them for their applications.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Raby? Those in favour? Thank you. Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 14, the assemblies of councillors. I'll take that as read. Do we have a motion regarding the assemblies of councillors? Councillor Webb?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The motion being that council receive and note the assemblies of councillors report for the period 9 March 2021 to 6th of April 2021.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tan? Those in favour?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, sorry, just one comment before you go ahead. I just noticed in the on the 30th of March, the CEO's annual review, it noted that in the CEO annual performance, that CEO Caroline Conrick for the final 30 minutes, but I don't think she was there. So if we could just have that noted. And also for the councillor briefing session budget workshop 4, I'm not sure that the business and performance manager was there either. Maybe she could confirm that.
No, yeah. No, that was the one where Mark Davies was zoomed in, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Can we note that? Both of those? Thank you. Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. The resolutions register as at the 16th of March 2021. Do we have a motion for that, please? Councillor Raby?
Yeah, a recommendation that council receive and note the council resolutions registered as at the 16th of March 2021.
And a seconder for the motion? Councillor Sladen? Those in favour? The motion is passed. Thank you. I think, councillors, that concludes the agenda. There are no more items. Are there someone wants to raise something before we close the meeting? Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Madam CEO, Mr. Alexander, Mr. Snook, and also the support of Ms. Snell. Thank you very much. We would close the meeting, and I'd like to thank all those attendees online who've viewed the proceedings as well. Thank you very much. Have a good night, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you.